Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Fume. Hey, you know that stinking habit that you can't seem to put down? What if I were to tell you there's a perfect alternative with no vapor, no electronics, and no harmful chemicals? You'd jump on it, right? Well, I'm not talking just to hear my own voice, folks. It's Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device designed to be the perfect alternative to that habit of yours. The flavored air route is quickly becoming the big thing. Believe me, I ain't blowing smoke, and you won't be either. See what I did there? Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code CHILLING to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code CHILLING to get a free gift with your order today.
It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
Good evening, listener. You're listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. On tonight's edition, we invite you to leave behind your safe reality and descend with us into the frightening depths of the most terrifying imaginations, with 2 audio adaptations of frightening fiction about lurid legends and suspicious statements. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley, and tonight I'll be your guide as we traverse the dimly lit corridors of your darkest dreams. I also wanted to take a moment to thank you for all of your donations. We are halfway to our goal and truly couldn't do any of this without you. Joining us tonight to help bring to life the frightening fiction of Scott Savino is Michelle Kane, Justine Anastasia, Terri Hudson, Geoff Sturtevant, Danielle Hewitt, and Jason Crum. Now get your ticket ready. Take your seat in our theater of the minds and brace yourself. It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Our first tale this evening is by Scott Savino and is performed by Michelle Kane, Justine Anastasia, Terri Hudson, and Geoff Sturtevant. In it, a battered woman retreats to the protection of her sister who lives in a seaside village called Echo Bay. While staying in an Airbnb, she learns the local legend of an island known as Mermaid's Roost, and it changes the direction of her life forever. Now, without further ado, I present to you The Legend of Mermaid's Roost.
We look the same, and we always have. But we couldn't be more different from each other. I think that's the best place to start with this. Some identical twins have a lot in common. They like the same foods, the same things on television. Some even spend their entire lives dressing in the same clothes. But we were never those girls. For as long as I remember, it's been hard for even our own parents to tell us apart, were it not for our very different personalities. Our own mother can't tell the difference between our voices over the phone to this day. We even have the same laugh. But after that, we diverge. I'm extroverted, and would much rather be outdoors than inside, where she is bookish and reserved. As far as personality traits go, Lily and I have always shared very few. We both have our father's nose and our mother's heart-shaped face and her high cheekbones. The same raven black hair falls in waves past both of our shoulders, and the same emerald green, almond-shaped eyes sparkle with hidden flecks of gold that you can only see if you take a look up close. Still, there's a connection between us that can't be explained. We just feel it. Know it's there. It's a thing with identical twins, no matter how truly different they really are. Some say it's a sort of telepathy. If you believe in that sort of thing, that's the reason I knew something was wrong before I had proof. I knew when I woke up in the morning that something was happening and that it was big. I even knew when I finally got up the nerve to send her a text, she would reply this time. Not right away, but this time, she would. She hadn't been replying to me at all lately, no matter how often I sent her messages. Something was different now. I'd hear back from her, but it would be at least a week, possibly a few days more before I did. Sending this text was different. Something I could feel in my bones told me she'd finally tell me what was going on with her. Where had she been? In my heart, I knew the lack of communication over the past several months wasn't something she had chosen. Somehow I knew she wanted to talk to me, but for some reason, she couldn't. And that was a very strange and unnerving feeling for a twin to have. In the past, before Lily's recent radio silence, she and I had rarely gone for more than a day or two without checking in. In the past year, that had suddenly changed, and I had no logical explanation for it. This particular morning, a feeling of unease is everywhere around me, and even somehow inside me. I feel it in bed before I even open my eyes, like an itch you can't scratch, because you know it will just make the rash worse, and trying to ignore it altogether will drive you mad. The worst part about the itch was knowing that after months of nothing, I would finally hear back from Lily. It was time. She was ready to talk. I knew it. I don't know how. I just did. Somehow, after months of unanswered messages, my next text would finally garner a response, and knowing that made me jittery. The itch was made worse by the inexplicable knowledge that the response was going to take days. At least I would get it, but I'd have to wait for it for days. If she hadn't replied to me in months, why should that make me feel so uneasy? I couldn't say. The whole prospect of this scenario made me nervous, but I told myself I would send the message right after breakfast because my sister needed me to send it, and she needed me to send it today. It was important that I reached out to her this morning. Whatever happened is bothering me so much that I burned the pancakes and have to start them over 3 different times.
Vibes are off today, Emily.
My wife Jasmine begins. She sits patiently, waiting for me to serve her a plate of good ones, pancakes that aren't burnt, at the table in our kitchenette.
I just changed that bag last night, you know, and if you keep doing that, I'll have to take it out again before we even get to eat. What's up with you?
Not me, I reply. It's Lily. Something's up with Lily.
Oh, you finally hear back from her? What's going on?
That's just it. I haven't heard anything in months, but that's definitely about to change. I don't know. It's just a feeling, babe. Hard to explain, I say.
A twin thing?
She asks. Exactly. It's twin tuition. It's like...
Intuition.
She finishes for me.
I get it. Did you try calling her or texting her yet?
Jasmine asks. No, but it's because I'm afraid she won't answer right away, and I don't want to have that fear be real, I admit. That's weird, isn't it?
Very.
She says, getting up from the table. She picks my phone up from the counter and grabs me by the waist, moving me away from the stove and spinning me around. She pecks a small kiss on my lips and lifts one of my hands, placing the phone into it. She gives me a little shove toward the kitchenette table and pulls out the chair for me.
You're going to sit here and write a text to your sister, and I'm going to finish making breakfast.
She tells me. I sit here looking at my phone for a while, unsure of how to start. Finally, I type. Anything wrong? Worried about you. And I hit send. 8 days pass before Lily texts me back, and it's a flood of texts in the morning from an unknown number, one after the other.
Sorry, I didn't get back to you right away. You were right about Eric. I didn't tell you a lot because I thought you'd be ashamed of me. Or mad. You've always been so much stronger than I am. I packed and left the night you texted me. I was afraid to reply because I thought he might be able to read it somehow. He definitely was tracking the phone, so I left it at the bus station that morning. It took me a few days to get set up, but I'm in Echo Bay now, and this is my new number. Just got one of those burner phones from Walmart. It's nothing special, but that's on purpose. I'm staying in a bungalow on the beach. Very cute. Just a few miles from you and Jasmine, actually. It's nothing permanent, just an Airbnb. I figured coming here would be safest for now, to figure out what to do next. I never told him where you were, and he will try to find me if he can. He'll follow me till the ends of the earth. I should have told you about him. The whole truth. Now, I finally can. If you're not busy, come by today. I'll tell you the whole story.
The last text she sends puts tears in my eyes, and I call her right after I read it, and we make plans.
I'm pretty sure if I stayed, he would have killed me sooner or later. Probably sooner.
I meet Lily for lunch at her bungalow in the afternoon, and she's right. It's very cute. She, on the other hand, looks like a mess, and I find myself both irate and awestruck. I don't understand how the bruises haven't fully healed or even begun to heal a little. That bastard really did a number on her. It's 8 days later, and her face and skin are purple and green, with bruises in so many places, appearing to be so fresh that you'd think she'd been at the bottom of a 3-car pileup just the night before.
He wasn't always like this, you know? In the beginning, he was really charming. It took a long time to figure out that person wasn't real.
She doesn't eat much, mostly just moves the food around on her plate with her fork. She goes quiet and drifts away from the conversation a lot, which is strange for me, because she was always the one with more focus. I'm the daydreamer. She's the grounded one. That's how we've always been. A few times, while she's sitting silently, she begins to cry. When I hold her hand, it turns into a wailing sob, and I reassure her that none of this is her fault, that this is the sort of thing that happens to a lot of women, that they feel trapped and never try to get out, never try to escape. They don't make it out. I reassure her that she's still strong, because she saw what was happening and she did something about it. She left. I reassure her quietly that although it shouldn't be this way, that it shouldn't happen, this still happens to lots of women anyway. She's not alone. She escaped it. She's a survivor. We can help you find a lawyer if you want, I offer at one point. We have money saved. We can pay for it. And she immediately shuts the idea down.
No, I'm not doing that.
She says adamantly.
I just want to be done with it. I came here to heal. I don't know if I'm staying or not yet.
She pauses for a moment and then adds,
I just need some time to figure out where I'm supposed to be.
But if you let him get away with it, he could do this to someone else, I say. You do realize that, right? You need to do something. He needs to pay for this.
He does need to. But what if he gets away with it? What if I report all of it and he sits trial for it? And what if he gets off? I can't take that chance. It isn't worth the consequences of it. What if I don't win?
What if you do? I ask her. She gets really quiet, then, promise me you'll think about it.
I will,
she says, and it's almost a whisper.
I just need some time. I made it away and I'm safe. I don't know if I want him to know where I am. If I do this, then he knows I'm here. And when he does, if I lose, he will kill me. You understand that, don't you? He will kill me. That man operates on some sort of twisted revenge. He won't even consider what would follow once he's gotten it. He'll just think about getting even with me. Jail isn't a deterrent when you're dealing with a human grenade. He'll only want to explode, to destroy. He won't worry about what happens to him after that. He doesn't work that way,
she says. She doesn't want to let me take pictures of her bruises, but I insist on it, and somehow actually win that argument. She tells me she's been trying not to even look in mirrors right now. She doesn't want pictures of her looking like this on her brand new phone, because what if she decides to take a picture of something beautiful, like a sunset, and she opens the camera and the photo gallery is right there, and she has to look at this instead. I tell her that she's still beautiful, no matter what happened to her. All that matters is what happens next. So I take the pictures for her with my phone. She takes off her shirt, and there are more bruises everywhere underneath. And we take pictures of those, too. I manage to keep my own feelings bottled up for the entire afternoon, until she takes her shirt off. And now, before I realize I'm doing it, I'm crying also.
Shh, shh, shh,
she whispers.
You can't cry. You're the strong one.
I shake my head and tell her that we're both strong. And then we're both sobbing, and she presses her face against my chest. And I press my head onto the top of hers until she steps away from me and tells me that I have to stop crying on her because I'm getting snot in her hair. We both laugh. It's not funny. Nothing about this afternoon has been. But we both laugh anyway, and our laughs still sound the same. I spend the entire day with her, and as the sun goes down, we leave her bungalow and take a walk along the beach. So, can I ask how you ended up falling for this guy? Identical or not, we clearly operate on different wavelengths romantically, and I just don't understand, I say, and then add, forgive me if that's too personal.
No, it isn't,
she begins.
And if only we operated on the same wavelength, or even similar ones. I thought about you a lot in the past few years. Thought that if only I was a big old lessie like you, if I just went for girls, none of this would have ever happened.
Don't be so sure. Domestic abuse doesn't have a gender. There's shitty, abusive partners in queer relationships too, I tell her.
Well, regardless, I've actually asked myself the same question about 100 times in the last week. What drew me to him, and where and when did things change, you know? When did he go from the ideal boyfriend to an absolute monster?
She tells me that when she met this bastard, Eric Warminster, it was like something out of a movie. And her story begins that way too, like a cheesy rom-com, so corny it sounds fake. I almost tell her how much I hate romantic comedies. I almost tell her to give me some horror flick any day of the week. I think better of it just before I do, and don't say the thought aloud. She never went for horror, even when we were girls. And that's what she ended up with despite her aversion to it. That was what her life had become. She tells me they were both in the produce section of the grocery, neither of them paying too much attention. He on the phone and she looking over her shopping list. They both reached for a pineapple, the last pineapple in the crate. He asks her what she plans to do with it if he lets her have it, and she tells him she's just going to cut it up and eat it. He tells her he's making a pineapple upside-down cake with it. She tells him honestly, matter-of-factly, and he invites her over to his place that night to be the judge of whether or not his recipe is any good. Normally, she tells me, she'd never have done something like that. She tells me that she's not the type to just go to a strange man's place on a whim. But he was good-looking and had a charming way about him. She fondly describes his smile. It's out of character, and she can't say exactly what makes her drop her guard and give this man her number, but she does. And the dinner he cooks for her, as well as the cake he makes, are both excellent.
That wasn't the only cake he made for me. One day when we were still getting to know each other, he asked me a load of questions. What's my favorite color? Favorite flower? That sort of thing. Remember that movie, Steel Magnolias? I told him that was my favorite movie. He says he's never seen it. Not a week later, he tells me he watched it and he asks me to come by after work. Says he's got a surprise for me.
She says, "No fucking way," I said, interrupting her. I told you rom-coms aren't really my thing, but I'd known that was Lily's favorite since we were in middle school. Of course, I'd suffered through it and we'd watched it together. Her with a tissue pressed against her eyes and me rolling mine. He made the armadillo cake? I ask. You mean to tell me he watched the movie just because you mentioned it, and then he made the cake? Lily smiles briefly at the recollection and nods.
He was very romantic in the beginning.
She tells me. Eric does all sorts of things to win Lily's heart. He'd make her breakfast in bed, take her on picnics. She tells me he would even sit there calmly while she complained about her coworkers. And instead of trying to fix the problem or offer his advice, by the end of the conversation, he'd have found a reason to hate the people she said she hated in her story, and have his own complaints about them too. According to Lily, he was perfect. And then shortly after she moved in with him, things started to change. And they changed fast. Little things at first. She accidentally buys the wrong type of cereal at the store and is met with,
Frosted Flakes? Really? Not Frosted Flakes, Mini Wheats. Are you fucking stupid or something? Frosted Mini Wheats. How hard is that for your useless, stupid brain to remember?
She tells me that once she folded the towels the way our mother always had when we were growing up. He didn't fold them that way, so he calls her into the bathroom, throws open the linen closet and proceeds to yank each one of them out, one by one, unfolding them with a flick of his wrist before squishing them into balls and leaving them in a heap on the floor.
Do it the fucking right way the first time, or do it again, moron!
He shouts at her before storming out of the room.
He told me all my friends were toxic next. I didn't have any friends except my coworkers, so he told me he didn't want me working anymore. Most women would kill to be homemakers. Do the dishes, spend the afternoon watching soap operas. He put me on an allowance, and I couldn't buy anything without telling him I was buying it.
She says.
He told me you were toxic too. Said you didn't love me, and the way he said it, how he explained it was so convincing. That's the reason I stopped returning your calls.
After she says this, she begins to cry quietly. He tells her if she tries to reach me or any of her other so-called toxic family and he finds out, he'll sell the car he bought her and they'd start having everything, all the shopping and groceries, delivered. She becomes afraid if she lets anyone know what's happening, she'll lose what little freedom he grants her, and she'll be trapped in their house for good. Trapped there with him for good. There are a few other anecdotes just like those in her story, and I find myself getting more and more angry as she recounts all of this to me. Then it hits me. Each story is just another small escalation. I'm so mad. I could run this man down with my car, then get out and curb stomp his head before setting him on fire. I can feel the desire to do that just from what she tells me up to this point. She still hasn't gotten to the day he begins to put his hands on her, and my blood is already boiling. She gets quiet for a long time, and we just walk. I reach out and take her hand, and when I do, she puts the thoughts that I was having just a moment earlier into words.
I can sense how mad you are. I haven't even told you about the first time he hit me.
She says, you can keep talking about it, but you don't have to if you don't want to, I say.
I don't want to, but I'm going to anyway. I'm ashamed.
You shouldn't be. None of this was your fault, I tell her.
I know. I am anyway.
She continues.
I feel like I need to tell you. I have to tell someone. I haven't talked about any of this. It's poison and I want it out.
The first time he hits her, it's a punch in the face. He doesn't even start off with a slap or something. He'd never hit her before, and the first time he does, it's a closed fist. She isn't expecting it to happen. The reason he claims he did it afterward is that she'd overcooked his pork chop. They finish eating, and as she collects his plate, she asks him how it was. He says it was chewy, and then out of nowhere, he punches her in the eye. After he discovers he can get away with something like that, it starts happening all the time. He throws her against a wall for forgetting to charge his phone for him. She'd forgotten somewhere that she was responsible for every small thing when it came to keeping the household running. Even things that she'd never been asked to do. Things as small as putting his phone on the charger for him so he wouldn't have to do it himself. He didn't want a girlfriend or a partner. He wanted a slave. If he was leaving for work and she couldn't tell him where his keys were, he'd choke her so roughly and for so long that her vision would go white, then black, only to stop moments before she was about to pass out. She'd forget who she was dealing with and speak out of turn. And he'd take her by a fistful of hair and drag her into their guest room, where he'd installed a padlock she hadn't noticed before. He'd lock her inside and leave her there for a full day, sometimes two, without anything to eat or drink. He'd tell her how lucky she was to be so well kept. He'd tell her that the first time she ever tried to leave him would be the last time she tried that, because dead women can't leave anyone, ever. The awful stories pour out of her, sometimes slowly, like the tears that well in the corners of her eyes, growing like drops at the tip of a leaky tap until big enough to fall. Sometimes in a deluge of rolling sobs as powerful as a wave, like a wall of water from a burst dam. I don't interrupt her. I don't know what to say, so I only listen. I know my sister. She doesn't want me to say anything, because nothing I could say would take away the pain of any of this for her. Eventually, the emotions and stories are all spent, and she grows silent. When she speaks again, it's to change the subject.
What's that out there?
She asks, pointing out at a spot in the water. The sun has nearly set, and the only thing we can see is a great dark space on the horizon. The place where I live is old and still has a working lighthouse. It's more for nostalgia than anything else now. As if on cue, the light sweeps across the darkness, revealing a large, not-so-distant island that mostly exists as an outcropping of rocks. The locals call it Mermaid's Roost, I tell her. Lots of the old-timers, the superstitious ones, say that's where the sirens live. She smiles at that. I realize it's the first time I've seen her smile all day, and it's an incredible feeling. It's too soon to call it healing, but it's the beginning of something like it, and I can feel it radiating from her. It feels warm. She lifts her phone and opens the camera.
It's gonna be my first picture in my new phone,
she says.
I was waiting for something beautiful. I wanted the first one I took to be something beautiful.
The Roost is why they put the old lighthouse here in the first place. Supposedly, there's dozens of old ships that sank out there, I tell her.
They heard the sirens singing and rammed their ships against the rocks to be closer to them.
Lily says.
The legend is that they're still out there and you can still hear them if they want you to. If they want you to come out to them. When men hear them from the water, it's because they want to smash the ships. When they hear them from the shore, it's always a trick, a call to swim out to them. Most don't make it. There's an awful undertow. They drown. If they do make it that far, the sirens just kill them and eat them. They're not actually mermaids at all, but birds with the heads of women. Weird, right? They're from Greek mythology, you know? Surprising anyone believes anything like that out here.
That's right, I say, struggling to hide my surprise. But how do you know all that? You just got here.
There's a book about it at the house,
she explains.
I didn't just get here. I've been here for about 3 days. I've read the whole thing twice. Didn't realize it was a local thing. That explains 2 things. Why it was in the house to begin with, but also why it wasn't written very well. I thought it was probably self-published or a vanity press sort of thing.
She shrugs and says,
I didn't realize why it was at the house until now. I like it anyway. It's just about the only thing there is to read in there.
I'm flabbergasted. 3 days? You got here and waited 3 days to text me? I heard the rest of what she said, but that's the only thing that registers.
I was scared,
she says.
Scared to tell you about any of this stuff.
I get it. I'm not mad or anything, but Jesus, Lily. You've been this close for 3 days? I've been worried sick about you for over a week.
I know,
she whispers and grabs my hand.
I'm sorry.
We should probably get back before it gets too dark, I say.
Stay with me tonight? Say you will? Call Jasmine and tell her you'll be home in the morning?
I say I will, and that we need to start to head back to her place. We've walked about a mile, so it will take us a while to get back, and this isn't the kind of beach that's made up of gentle slopes of endless sand. There's sand, of course, but it's also full of rocks to trip and bust your head open on in the dark. When we're halfway there, and the sky is a deep, dark purple, like the color of wine when it's still in the bottle, she stops and looks back at Mermaid's Roost. The shadow of it still looms on the dark violet horizon, like a giant sleeping in the sparkling black blanket of water. Her eyes grow wide and seem to fill with tiny golden diamonds, like flecks of light reflected by the stars. Her face glows with an uncharacteristically innocent wonder.
Emily,
she whispers.
Do you hear them too?
And I think she's fucking with me, so I say sure, and tell her to hurry up because I'm starving and I want to order us a pizza and call my wife to let her know I'll be staying with her in the bungalow. Also that my feet hurt. The truth is that I can barely hear her when she asks the question in the first place.
That's beautiful,
she says quietly, and I agree, because I think she's talking about the town, or the beach, or the moon, or the stars, or anything else, anything real, and not some local legend that she can hear over the sound of the waves and the wind that I can't. When we get back to the little beach house, she pauses in the doorway and stares for a long time at the island of rocks. It's distant, but big enough to still see, if only just barely when the light from the lighthouse sweeps across it in the dark. And I think she's fucking with me, so... The house is awash with the chill and the sounds of the sea wind when I wake up. We went to the master bedroom around 11 p.m. to watch a movie. The plan was for us to stay in the same bed, like we used to do sometimes when we were little girls. The house has a guest room, and I could have slept in there. But Lily begged me to stay with her, so I did. And the truth is that I wanted to. It's 3 a.m., and the cold is what's roused me from sleep. But it's panic that pulls me fully awake now. She's not here with me. I know she's not in the house. I know this the same way that I know she turned the TV off when she left. She did this so a loud commercial didn't wake me. I know this because it's what I would have done if I was trying to sneak away and I didn't want her to stop me. I know all of this the same way I knew she was in trouble, but I didn't know how or why over a week ago. Twin tuition. I've never had a feeling like this one before. It's strong and clear, but also deep and dark like the water outside. I know from the moment I wake up that I won't see her alive again, but I search the entire house for her anyway. I go from room to room checking every closet, beneath both the beds and even behind the shower curtain in the bathroom. When I get to the living room, I see the reason the house is so cold. She didn't shut the door behind her when she left. The legend of Mermaid's Roost is laying open on the counter, and she's used seashells to hold the pages open to where she's circled a passage in black marker.
When men hear the sirens singing, it is always, without a doubt, an attempt at temptation. Their beautiful and deadly song is said to be the lure calling sailors ever closer to the rocks of Mermaid's Roost, to smash their ships along the stony shore. But the sirens don't stop there. Their singing has not only been heard by men at sea, but by those who walk along the shores after dark. They call out to the men on the mainland, trying to convince them to swim out to the roost, a distance just over half a mile. According to the legends, most of those that attempted the swim the distance to the island would get caught in the undertow and drown. If they managed to make it the entire way, The sirens of Mermaid's Roost would rip them apart with their talons and eat them alive while they screamed for a mercy that would never come. Death is always the fate of men who hear the song. According to the myths, women almost never hear their enchanting calls from across the bay. But for those that do, the call is never a deadly temptation, but rather an invitation to join them, to sing with them and lure men to their untimely deaths. Those women that do hear them may choose to join their deadly flock if they wish to do so. According to the local histories, this is rare, and the women that choose to join them are never seen or heard from again.
At the bottom of the page, a note in her handwriting simply reads,
Figured out where I'm supposed to be. Thanks for today. I love you always.
I rush outside, knowing there's no reason to hurry because I'm already too late. She's already made her choice, and I don't need my twin tuition to tell me that because I can hear her. She's singing. Mermaid's Roost is over a mile away, and I know it's her voice because it sounds so much like my own. It's quiet from this distance, but the preternatural nature of her chorus spans the space between us with ease and clarity. But this song is not my invitation to join her. It's her last request. When I offered to pay for a lawyer so she could make him pay for putting his hands on her, she was afraid she wouldn't win. But that fear is gone now. She's found a whole flock that'll be willing, that lives for the sole purpose of picking better men than him apart. And they will, as they've done to so many before him. That is, if he even survives the swim. He's too far from here to hear her song, but he's not too far for me. I don't know exactly how to reach you, Eric Warminster, but I know where you live, and there can't be more than one man with that name where you are. In the morning, I'll make a few calls until I find you, and when I do, I'm pretty sure that Lily was right when she said you'd try to kill her if she ever left. I'm banking on her fear that you'd follow her to the end of the earth. I'm also pretty sure you won't know the difference between her voice and mine, especially not over the phone. Our own mother can't most of the time. I don't even have to face you, and I already know what to say to get you out here too. I'll taunt you and belittle you, just like you did to her. I'll be laughing the entire time. You'll come. It should be easy enough. Our laughs sound the same. All I have to do is tell you to meet me at the beach after dark. I know by the sound of the song she's singing that she's changed so much already. I wonder if the transformation was instantaneous, or if it takes time for her feathers to grow in and fully form. I wonder if that even matters. I wonder if she must complete her change before she can do what she means to do to you. And something about her tone tells me, no, she's ready for you now. The words of her melody aren't in English anymore, but in a vernacular that up until now, I would have believed impossible. The sweet song seems to originate from a great creature, both mythical and feminine and beautifully deadly. Bird-like, the calls drift out from the newly formed and massive beak. I see her face has shifted and grown it already with my mind's eye. The sound reaches out over the water for only me to hear. Lily sings in a language so musical and ancient now that the words themselves have long been forgotten. Yet despite their foreign nature, I don't have to understand the tongue to understand the meaning of her song. The sound of the music of Mermaid's Roost fills my mind, entering my ears It surges through my head before seeming to flow and tread before my eyes. I can see what she wants me to do in images that hover barely visible, like an ethereal painting before me. She wants me to get you to this beach. And I will. That's her last request. Her only request. Get you to the shore, and she'll take care of the rest.
This episode of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights is brought to you by Fume. I get that habits are hard to break, believe me. Remember that quote from Brokeback Mountain? I wish I knew how to quit you. Okay, bad example. Anyway, dropping a bad habit is a whole lot harder than switching it for a better one. And no one knows that better than our good buddies at Fume. Fume has this award-winning innovative device that allows you to fill that oral fixation without ingesting all those nasty chemicals. Fume gives you something to lean on so you're not constantly craving those unhealthy habits. In fact, it's designed to become a habit itself. A good habit. One that's earned them the backing of doctors in the United States. No chemicals, no vapor, no batteries. Just natural, delicious flavors. My favorite flavors are crisp mint and orange vanilla. Once you give them a try, I think you'll quickly come to appreciate them over the mildewy dish rag flavor of those coffin nails of yours. Also, this Fume device is a lot of fun to use. It's got all these fidgety doodads to play with. Perfect for keeping yourself busy when you're anxious or stressed out. By fidgety doodads, I mean the magnets and dials, but I prefer fidgety doodads. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use my code CHILLING to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code CHILLING to get a free gift with your order today. Thanks for your support and for supporting our valuable sponsors. I hope you enjoyed The Legend of Mermaid's Roost, as written by our friend Scott Savino and performed by Michelle Kane, Justine Anastasia, Terri Hudson, and Geoff Sturtevant. Our second tale of the evening is written by Scott Savino and performed by Danielle Hewitt and Jason Crum. In it, we meet a woman who does her best to convince the audience that she is sane and of sound mind and body. But the more she shares, the more you doubt her. Now, without further ado, I present to you, I'm the head librarian, actually.
Before I begin to tell you everything that's happened, I think it is important to ask yourself whether you think a mad woman would be able to hold the position of head librarian at Echo Bay's prestigious Eldertide Polytechnical University for 19 consecutive years. Do you think something like that would be possible? It's a rather difficult job to manage such a vast collection of reference materials, to ensure that they've been organized and categorized and reshelved correctly and logically once they've been borrowed and returned. It really does take a lot of skill. I'm sure that you're aware that our university is home to the nation's third largest marine biology, nautical engineering, and maritime history reference library. Of course you are. Everyone knows that. You can't be unhinged and also be responsible for the standard titles in fiction and nonfiction, the classics and new releases, an extensive backlog of microfiche, newsreels, and a wide collection of digital media, as well as hundreds of scholarly journals. These are things that students have come to expect from a university. They are paying tens of thousands of dollars that they've borrowed in student loans for an education. That's money that they will work for the next 50 or 60 years to repay. Did you know that our university is the university with the second largest collection of restricted access books, scrolls, clay tablets, and ancient one-of-a-kind texts on the occult? Well, that you probably didn't know. And I'm not supposed to talk about that. So why don't you do us both a favor and just forget I mentioned it? I ask you, would they trust a lunatic with such a large responsibility? No, I don't imagine that they would. I've seen the mentally unstable, suffering from various forms of psychosis and neuroses. The drug addicts and drunks. You've seen them too. You know you have. They're spending all day talking endlessly about kraken, mermaids, and boat-eating giant squids. They think they're talking to someone else, but there's nobody there. They're just sitting by themselves on a bench down by the wharf. Sure, they'll realize they're not talking to anyone eventually. Then, if they have even half a wit, they'll go find some sucker who will take pity on them. A skipper or a deck boss. Someone who will let them scrape barnacles off the side of their barge for a couple 20s. Most of those fishermen know they've pulled in quite the haul, so they can afford to take pity on some poor nitwit. Get them to do the jobs nobody wants to do for pocket change. Maybe those imbeciles will get really lucky, and some blowboater will have them scrub down the deck of their fancy new sailboat for a crisp $100 bill. Or polish the chrome railings and whatnot. I tell you, that's what the crazies do around here. They hang out at the docks, hoping to make enough money to buy themselves a handle of Gordon's gin. The plastic one, for $15. Just so they can pass out on the beach under the stars and get bitten by sand fleas all night long. I see it every day. It's just what the nutjobs do. Cuckoo birds aren't head librarians. They're not even regular librarians. And certainly not at the leading university in a 200-mile radius for marine biology, fishery management, and coastal environmental studies. No, sir, they are not. And that's just to name a few of the more popular fields of study here at the university. We have many, many programs for those intelligent, hardworking, and qualified students who have spent their lives fascinated by sea exploration and sea-related fields of study, and I'm proud to be a part of such an important organization. I'm proud to say that from the year I began, I've helped each and every one of our graduates at some point discover that there's more to see within the sea than we initially see. Or maybe I haven't. I've at least told them where to go find some book or other that they're looking to find. Unless it's one of those books from the access-restricted collection of occult texts that we keep secretly locked in the sub-basement. I'll kindly remind you again to forget about those. They're off limits. Now, I'm humble, so I don't brag. I'm not telling you that I've been in charge of all of the college's books for nearly 2 decades, because I expect you to be astonished. I wasn't fed my master's degree in library science on a silver spoon by my rich parents. I grew up very poor like so many of you. I came from meager beginnings. My family had nothing, like most families still here in Echo Bay. That's right. I grew up here. We aren't expected to do anything particularly astonishing growing up amongst the fishers and the crabbers on these prolific shores. The town is known only for its propagative fisheries, for crustacean trapping and shellfish. We're seafood people of modest stock. I never knew I was destined to do such grandeur as a title of a university's head librarian, and for 19 continuous years. This is a quiet, coastal town that some will tell you has unique charms, beauty, and history. Those things are lies. The only thing here is fish, and everything smells just like you'd expect. The only industries here are the fisheries. The whole town stinks like the rotten breath of Poseidon, and everyone you meet smells like they've bathed in the mouth of a bloated whale carcass that washed ashore at the height of summer. Still, you'll find that we're more or less unpretentious people. We don't brag much, but maybe we should do it a bit more than we do. The town itself is awful, but we have one of the best maritime polytechnic universities anywhere in the entire country. And that's something we should be proud to say. I might be biased, but the university employs a great support staff. Most of the professors also do their jobs most of the time. It's common knowledge that we've taught some of the leading marine technologists, aquatic environmental scientists, and maritime law and policy makers from here to New Bismuth and Harlow's Cove. I bet even someone like you knew about that already. Our graduates are making big names for themselves, even as far away as Clarion and Hedonis. So I assure you that the crazy people aren't found here at Eldertide Polytechnic. No place near it. Only reasonable people here, and they certainly wouldn't let a psychopath be the head of the university's library staff. Why? I've just told you. Haven't you been listening? The lunatics are out near the docks like they've always been, gibbering away their drunken theories of sunken pirate ships, lost treasures, and the superstitious legend about the sirens that supposedly make their home out on Mermaid Roost. When those wackadoos are done running their mouths for the day, they're outside sleeping rough. They're exposed to the elements, spending all night cold and wet under the stars on Hidden Haven Beach. They've got their heads on jagged rocks instead of pillows out there, laying on beds made of cigarette butts and broken liquor bottles. That's where all the noodle heads around here sleep at night. They're all camped out there on that nasty beach with the rest of their kind. The vagrants and derelicts, the dropouts, skateboarders and unwed mothers, tattoo artists, and the illiterates too. Hidden Haven is the trashiest beach we've got in Echo Bay, and level-headed, decent people who can read stay away from there. I heard from a reliable source that when intelligent people even think they might want to visit that beach just to see, they should just go to a rehab instead. There's a nice one out in Harlow's Cove, I hear. I'll save them some time, though, because the only reason anyone with any sort of logic would think thoughts like that is someone slipped them drugs, or they got talked into drinking some of that tide pool tonic by a whalehead. All it takes is you accidentally taking edible marijuana or trying some of the seafoam slurry just one time, and you'll never be the same again. After that, you're addicted now. Quit your job and become a Webby. That beach is crawling with that enclave scum, too. Used to be that cult ran the whole town, but there's less than 200 of those wackos left. All greenmouths. Every single one of them. So they're easy to spot and avoid. Belong in the gutter, if you ask me. That's the type of corrupted skelm a place like Hidden Havens belongs to. But I digress. Set a single toe in that beach's sand and you might as well throw your whole life in the trash. Because people out there bring no value to society. You'll find yourself turning tricks so a pimp can give you some heroin or worse. A pint of Celestia. Faster than you can say lickety-split. Happens just that fast. Can't take a step on the beach without tripping over a box of dirty needles full of methamphetamines is what I've heard. You listen to me. I work in education, so I know what I'm talking about. Hidden Haven isn't the only beach you don't visit in Echo Bay. You don't go to Twilight Cove either. Not if you don't want to die horribly with your skin pulled off and your insides fed to something's pet. They'll call me crazy, because nobody goes through the pass that leads down to Twilight Cove. Not anybody born and raised here in Echo Bay, and not tourists either. But I've done it. I did it just last night. The path between those cliffs is too rough and stony for tourists, and the Bay people are too superstitious. Afraid of the Zygonians to take the walk down to that beach. Twilight Cove's not for the Bay people. That's their territory. If you grew up in the Bay, you grew up being told that the Zygonians are down on the beach, and they don't take kindly to trespassers. Especially not ones that can only breathe plain old regular air with normal human lungs. The Bay people say that if you go down between those cliffs, you better have a damn good reason, and something shiny to offer those web-footed freaks. Because if you don't, and you're dumb enough to go out on a particular stretch of beach, you won't be seen nor heard from, ever again. It ain't an expressibly forbidden place to go. There's no laws against it. Nobody's gonna stop you. Nobody stopped me. You just ask anyone who's spent their lives around these parts, though. Ask them, and they'll tell you why you've got to stay away. They'll tell you there's a whole race of people that aren't quite people, hiding out in that cove. They've been out there for centuries, and the world don't know about them. That's just the way they want it to stay, too. They've been out there staying unseen since before the town was a town, before this state was even a state. They're fish people. That's what they are. It isn't just webbed fingers and toes. They say from far off something about the skin just doesn't look quite right. Looks a bit shinier than skin should. They say you don't want to get anywhere near them to see what's off about their skin up close. But if you're foolish enough to try, you'll see it ain't skin at all. It's a whole mess of scales. When I was a little girl, my mother, who also grew up here too, told me the people hiding in Twilight Cove had gills, and if they caught you walking out on their beach, they'd drag you down beneath the white caps and into the black waves. The waves are always black out there, day and night. Nobody knows why. Once they've pulled you under, they'll take you to their hidden shining city in the coral caves. She said the Zygonians breed crabs, grow them even bigger than dogs, and they'll peel off your skin the same way a fisherman uses a boning knife, just so their mean and nasty pets don't have to work too hard to get their claws inside. Jab you in the spaces between your muscles, and get your good parts. Get at your meat. That's all the Bay people are to the Zygonians. Meat. If you don't want to be meat, you've got to bring them some treasure. They'll take gold, silver, diamonds, gems of all kinds, really. But for your sake, if they catch you out there, whatever treasure you're bringing them had better be real. Otherwise, you're meat. When they find him, no, if they find him, they'll say I'm mad. Of course they will. Because nobody in their right mind goes down to that beach.
Hello, I'm Bradley Wilcott, Eldertide Polytech University's new president.
I heard the stories all my life, and you think someone like me, head librarian at Eldritch Polytech for 19 goddamn years, who grew up in this seaside fish-stinking town, ought to know better than to go out there. You'd have to be stupid or crazy to go out there. Especially not at night.
And you're Darlene, Miss Darlene Fisher, the head librarian? According to your file, you've been here a very long time. I do wish we were meeting under more pleasant circumstances.
But I'm not stupid, and I'm not crazy either. I was perfectly sound-minded and sober when I made my way to his goddamn house. The street was poorly lit, and that was good. I was only a little worried that I might be seen making my way up the sidewalk by one of the neighbors. So, naturally, I knew if I was mentally disturbed, I would have kept everything on. But I wasn't that way, so I had to take it off. That way, if anyone saw me through their windows, they would just see a naked woman in the street. They'd know I was being rational and wise. They'd know I was just out for a sensible stroll in the dark.
As you know, the Board of Trustees has appointed me to this position because they felt that my predecessor extended very little oversight to the budget spending of quite a few departments.
I'm not a department head. I'm the head librarian.
You're in charge of the purchase of the university's books, are you not?
Well, naturally. I took off my blouse and bra first, then my skirt and panties. The air felt sweet and unseasonably cool as it caressed my exposed breasts. This breeze, of course, very naturally, caused my sane and rational nipples to harden ever so slightly, in just the way that I had hoped and planned for. The way that deliberate and logical nipples are meant to react in accordance to a breath of cold night air. The house, my destination, was just up ahead. Every window was dark and the driveway was empty. It appeared as though I would arrive at the most practical and prudent time for a level-headed woman like myself to arrive. Precisely when I'm intended to. At a time when there was nobody home. I tucked my discarded clothes into a storm drain that opened up beneath a curb on the side of the road. Afterward, I cut diagonally from the sidewalk and through a yard with a large Victorian home standing like a sentry, in the center of the lot, growing heavily, with a number of oak trees that were old and thick. Many lights were on inside, but I didn't worry, because I knew that anyone who might look out would only see a fully rational and not insane naked woman on a typical late-night walk beneath the shadowy canopy of branches that densely covered the property. I lurked from tree to tree, skipping through the darkness as naturally as possible, only stopping once to rest for a moment beneath the largest of the ancient gnarled oaks. I had been carrying a rope in my hands, but it was in a mangled knot, and it seemed more practical to wrap it in a coil around my arm. And I'm a practical woman, so that's what I did. Then I very smartly slung the loop of the rope over one of my shoulders and returned from the shadows of the tree in the yard to the sidewalk where I continued to nonchalantly make my way through the dark.
I just have a few questions about some of the purchases you've made in the last few years. I'm hoping you can help me understand some of these expenses.
Okay.
I'm seeing here that you spent...
I don't spend anything. The books belong to the library.
Okay, the library spent $13,000 on a volume titled Twilight Testament Unveiling the Esoteric. Can you explain that, Miss Fisher?
Certainly. That particular book was written by Friar Lucian Benedict. He was a powerful sorcerer, burned at the stake for heresy in, 1263, I think.
And for what reason did For what reason did the library spend $13,000 on this book?
Naturally, that's what a book like that would cost if it were the only copy that exists.
I see.
Moving naked through the black of night, I knew that anyone who might peer out into that desolate emptiness of a cul-de-sac would pay me, a naked woman simply walking, no mind. Wait, I'd forgotten to take off my shoes. How could a congenitally prudent head librarian for almost 20 years, like myself, forget to take off my shoes? A clear-headed, sane woman on a naked nighttime stroll, but wearing shoes? No, absolutely not. I panicked and ripped them off as quick as possible. I tucked my socks cleverly inside of them and abandoned my footwear in a mailbox as I passed. The danger of being discovered having passed, I breathed a sigh of relief and I continued on my way.
And Darlene, may I call you Darlene? What's this charge for $9,700 for something called chthonic codex communicating with the Eldritch. Can you explain that? What about $3,750 for something called the Alchemy of Night and Unveiling Infernal Secrets? Why are you making these purchases?
Well, you see,
I've actually been going through your purchase history, and there's almost $1.6 million of misappropriated funds here, Miss Fisher. And I've only gone back 10 years so far. There's 9 more years of this library's, your library's, purchase receipts to go through.
misappropriated? No. Those texts were acquired for the occult library.
I'm sorry, the what?
The occult library.
Where are these books, Miss Fisher? In order to recover these funds, the university is going to have to liquidate some, if not all, of this collection. Hopefully, I can find a buyer so we have a way to recuperate these losses.
Losses? These are treasures. Artifacts. I'm not going to let you sell them or even tell you where I keep the occult library.
Whether you tell me or not, you're facing very serious legal action, Miss Fisher. Do you understand that?
The occult library access is restricted. End of discussion. Mr. Wilcott was not married. He lived in the house alone, and he came home at midnight, which as a sensible woman, I found to be a very unsensible hour. I waited for him inside his bedroom for 2 hours. 2 full hours, I stood in the dark, arms bent up near my head, in my best impression of a hideous modern-style lamp. I tried to hold my breath, but I only lasted about a minute doing that. I didn't try to hold my breath again, and that was a very sane decision, because only a bonehead lunatic would not try to breathe for 2 full hours. When I arrived, I found a trellis at the side of his front porch that was heavily overgrown with rose bushes, and climbed up from the ground floor to the windows of the home's second story. The roses that crawled up along the trellis were protecting the house from humble intruders like myself, with a profusion of thorns. After letting myself inside through an unlocked window, I discovered that my arms, my legs, my breasts, and my hands were covered in nicks and scratches and scrapes. And for 2 hours, he inconsiderately left me in the corner of his bedroom in the dark, waiting patiently to kidnap him.
This is a maritime polytechnic university, Miss Fisher. We don't need an occult library. We should not have an occult library. And you, therefore, should not have purchased any texts for an occult library. When I show these numbers to the Board of Trustees, you're looking at some serious jail time.
Jail time?
This is embezzlement. Do you understand that? You're done here, Miss Fisher.
I'm the head librarian. 19 years. I've been in charge of this library for 19 years.
Well, I'm very sorry, Miss Fisher, but not anymore. You're fired.
When he came into the room, I wondered what he'd been doing out and about while I patiently, sensibly, waited for his return. Probably, he was out destroying some other people's lives. Good, upstanding, and reasonable people's lives. He thoroughly explained to me how he intended to ruin mine just hours before. It seemed to be something he enjoyed, and I was certain he'd ruin everything he was allowed to ruin if given the chance. I waited for him for so long that even my rational and logical blood acted practically with the time it was given. Everywhere that trellis thorn cut me while I climbed, the blood had quite astutely dried. Just another indicator that what I was about to do was not absurd. Even my blood was behaving level-headedly. If one can't trust one's own blood, then whose blood can one trust? I wasn't worried that he would see me when he turned on the light to undress and climb into bed. If he did, it wouldn't matter much. For what could be more natural than a naked woman in the darkened corner of your private room? I wasn't worried when I made my way down the road and into his house. Why should I worry now? And as it turned out, he never had a chance to ponder the existence of a naked woman standing so naturally and logically in the corner of his room pretending to be a lamp. I had chosen a very practical corner to stand in while I waited for him to arrive. I loosened a length of the rope between my clenched fists as he entered through the doorway with his back to me. Before his hands even reached for the light switch, my arms were over his head, wrapping the cord around his neck from behind. They'll all say I've lost it. They'll say I've lost my mind. But that's not the case at all. I had to knock him unconscious with the butt end of my knife when I got him to the car, because he very foolishly tried to fight me when I took him for a ride. I parked at the mouth of the pass and dragged him down between those cliffs. And when the waterline was low, I was stable and lucid and completely sane as I tied that bastard down to the heaviest rocks I could find at the water's edge. Arms and legs all splayed out so he couldn't sit up or swim away when the tide came in. If someone was to find him, but I'm fairly certain no one will, I don't think there will be any evidence left to tie what happened to him here back to me. I've been naked this whole time. Less evidence that way. That was very clever of me indeed. I don't think he's told anyone about his little investigation yet either. If he has shared what he's found, there's something in the library. A book called The Obsidian Grimoire, Lost Spells of Power, to make them all forget. Ironically, I'll have to look up the page because I can't remember which one it is. They probably won't find him, and even if they do, it won't matter, because the crabs will find him first. Don't have to be the great big ones my mama told me the Zygonian people keep either. The regular old little ones will do just fine. They can even take their time and eat him slow because nobody goes down to Twilight Cove, unless they're batshit crazy. Except for me. I'm the exception. The light of the moon was the only illumination on the pass between the jutting edges of the high rock formations that towered over each of my shoulders last night. It sparkled on the water in the distance like 1,000 diamonds scattered across black velvet. A forbidden treasure that called to me and led me down and down and down to the living darkness of the water's edge. My breathing was steady, matching the rhythm of the ebbing and flowing shoreline as it rolled toward me over and over, only to pull back into black and be sucked out away. The waves rolled in and the waves rolled out, and unconsciously, I matched each of my inhales and exhales to the beat of the tide, like one might attempt to match their breathing to that of a sleeping lover. The act was unintentional, the hand of destiny serendipitously guiding me along the correct path. Tonight, this ebony shore was my lover, and tonight, we would take this man's life. Not in the way that garden-variety sociopaths might take a man's life, with the sole desire of watching him die. Tonight, the sea and I would be two cogent and rational beings in love, who are also coincidentally both murderers who kill together in harmony. Together we would drown my new nemesis for the sake of love. My love for the forbidden knowledge of the occult. It wasn't being done in the name of chaos and irrationality. We were doing it methodically, reasonably and sensibly. Don't you see? Don't you understand that now? The sea loved me so much that it needed to kill Bradley Wilcott for me to prove that love was real. I could taste the clean salt that hung in the air as I dragged him over those jagged rocks, ignoring the sting of their sharp edges as they sliced into my bare and bloody feet. I made furtive glances behind me with every 10 or 12 steps, and felt no pain as I carefully but quickly made my way down between the cliffs. Any suffering I might have felt was overridden by the pleasure I found watching his head bounce roughly across those same rocks. The constant bludgeoning would keep him knocked out cold. The flow from the back of his head looked black beneath the starless sky, not red. and left smears as it mixed with the black of the footprints I left behind with each step I took along the path. I dragged him with one end of a rope tied around his ankles, and the bulk of it wrapped around my waist, a half a dozen times. The opposite segment of the rope was tucked between the coils that circled my waist, and pressed against my bare skin so that the end of it hung out past my hips. I tied a bag to the length that remained. I fetched it from my trunk when I dragged him from the car. The hilt of my knife protruded past where the top of the bag was cinched tightly closed. It hung low and heavy against my leg, bouncing rhythmically against my thigh. They'll call me a madwoman because I went down to Twilight Cove beneath a dark and starless sky, dragging behind me a man that I intended to tie to the rocks at low tide. They'll say that I did this all while Echo Bay slept, because, irrationally, my internal voice dictated, I must watch him die. But don't you see the truth in it all? Everything they say about me is a lie. They'll say I'm insane, because the only thing I felt was pleasure, as I watched the current roll back in and the water slowly rise up over his eyes. Because I laughed to myself when he regained consciousness at the perfect moment, and those eyes fluttered open with little bubbles coming out from behind the eyelids, and floating up to the surface of the water. They'll say I'm insane because I came out here, my waist wrapped in a rope that I unraveled, and using a knife, cut that rope into lengths so that I could tie this lunatic of a man down by each of his limbs. They'll call me certifiable because I gloated over him, my bare feet bleeding and my body completely naked against the ocean breeze, and bare-breasted against the moonlight as I watched him drown. They'll say I'm deranged because on a starless night, I trekked into a territory well known to belong to the Zygonians, to do this to a man who definitely deserved what fate had in store for him. But I'm none of those things. I'm completely sane. When I saw the first fish person come up and out of the waves, clawing his webbed fingers through the sand and pushing his hands into the ground to stand upright on his flipper-shaped feet, I didn't feel any fear. I knew that even though my nakedness rendered me easier to flay and feed to his giant pet crabs beneath the waves, Zygon and his fish people had an unspoken expectation for anyone and everyone who traipsed, uninvited, into Twilight Cove. This place is theirs, and everyone in Echo Bay knows that. We don't come to this place where we don't belong. If we do, they expect us to have a gleaming gift to give them. Each of them. Twilight Cove belongs to the race that lurks beneath the opaque waters there, and it has belonged to them since the time before men learned to walk upright. If you are on their beach, when they come up and out of the murky depths, they'll either drag you down to the vicious pitch-dark water into their shining city beneath the black waves, or they won't. It only depends on whether you came to the beach intending to meet their expectations. A moment later, another one is rising up from the white foam that swirls atop the surface of the inky dark sea. And another one, and another, and another. I'm not crazy. I'm not insane. I'm the head librarian of the prestigious Eldertide Polytechnic University. And I have been for the last 19 years, and I will be for 19 more and longer still after that. I've read everything about this place. Some of it's in my collection with restricted access, and some of it isn't. I came out here as an outsider, intending to meet their expectations. But I didn't have any pockets to stow away my shiny gifts. So I put them in a bag I tied around my waist. The bag was big. The bag was full. I knew what was out here. I knew what they would expect. This is the perfect place to bring a body, because anyone who comes here without gifts for each and every one of them, coming up and out from their city in the coral caves below, won't be seen again. There must have been 100 of that strange aquatic race climbing out of the water. I watched them rise up to the surface that rippled with the reflections of the moon. People don't come here, and if they do, they die. They might bring a gift and think they're wise, but one gift is not enough. You need to share with the whole class. I'm reasonable and pragmatic, and my well of resources is deep. The bag I brought with me was very, very big, and there were plenty of gifts inside to go around. They'll say what I did out in Twilight Cove last night was crazy, but it wasn't. They'll say that I'm unhinged or deranged because I dragged that man out there to watch him die, but I'm not. Elder Tide Polytechnic University wouldn't have trusted me to be the head librarian for 19 fucking years if I wasn't perfectly and completely rational and sane.
I hope you enjoyed I'm the Head Librarian, actually, as written by James Cooper and performed by Danielle Hewitt and Chilling Tales for Dark Nights newcomer Jason Crum. On to the shows. Longtime resident Otis Gyrie has his very own show here on our network, Scary Stories Told in the Dark, which you can hear every Sunday night. We also have Eric Peabody's Horror Hill, a podcast dedicated to some of our deeper and darker tales. We hope you check him out. And Drew Blood's Dark Tales airs Fridays, featuring some southern down-home horror. And don't forget to check out the Fear from the Heartland archives, featuring more than 120 episodes. Well, friends, our weekly descent into the depths has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us tonight, and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find an archive of our work going back to 2012. And consider signing up as a patron at our website, chillingtalesfordarknights.com, to show your support and get all of our content ad-free. I'm your host of the evening, Paul J. McSorley, and it's been a pleasure. Tune in again next week when we once again turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Sweet dreams, listener. Sweet dreams.